everyone, it's Sevy. Welcome to my guide on how to beat floor 11 and 12 of the 5.0 Abyss cycle. This time we're getting a bunch of new Natlan enemies, including some local legends and bosses. As usual, this video discusses strategies and tips to help you beat the chambers more easily. I'll just flash some very general reminders before you tackle Spiral Abyss, which you can pause to take a quick read. This Abyss Blessing gives 40% normal attack and skill damage bonus for 12 seconds after the active character uses an elemental skill. For characters in Night Soul's Blessing, this buff is enhanced to 80%. Starting with floor 11, all party members gain a 60% Dendro and Hydro damage bonus. The first half has a lot of mobs, so having a crowd controller like Venti, Kazuha, or Sucrose will help tons, especially with the Defend the Monolith chamber, plus an AoE team to make it easier to hit them all at once. There are lava avatars in the last chamber that have high pyro resistance and a pyro aura, so it will help to bring an element that can trigger reactions on them, like a hydro unit to vaporize on them. For this half, I'm using a national team. The second half is all single target waves. Bring your strong single target effective units and teams. One optional recommendation is bringing a pyro or electro, since the final chamber boss summons a cryo structure that's most effectively destroyed by pyro or electro. For this half, I'm using a Quick Bloom team, combining both Quicken and Hyperbloom damage. We're starting off with the usual Defend the Monolith chamber, this time with lots of Natlan warriors. If you have a crowd controller, you can more or less cheese through this. To start off, I try to approach or aggro the ranged warrior with the slingshot, so that I can later focus on those at the center without worrying much about her. Then I do my AoE setup near the center. Using a crowd controller makes disabling them so easy, just like I'm doing with Sucrose. The new waves will mostly continue to melee the monolith, so it's easier to hit them all at once there. If I see that my setup isn't hitting the next ranged warrior, I also approach and aggro them to get rid of them faster. I do this all the way to the last wave, and if you have the chance, you can generate particles to prepare your bursts for the next chamber. The second half is very easy, so it's okay if you end up losing a bunch of monolith health here. Next, we just have two waves of single ruin guards. They're easy to aggro, just start attacking them ASAP. Once you've got their attention, attack is normal. Then run to the ruin guard across once it spawns, and you can even try to get back your energy while finishing it off.
I'll protect us. Propagate.
This chamber once again has several waves of mobs, which can also be easier with a crowd controller or just really good AoE damage in general. First up are specters, and they spawn in triangles. Approach them from outside the triangle instead of trying to place yourself in the middle of them. That way, the rest will go near you, making it easier for your AoE attacks to get all of them.
Stand clear. Swirl. Mark 2. My sword. Witness that. Absorption test. I'm going in. Let's light it.
Then there are shroom monsters, which you can also use the same triangle strategy against, but starting with the Dendro shroom first can prevent it from flying. Even then, they're not too hard to kill. Last are Yumkasaurs, which you can approach from the corner again, and they'll generally jump to you. They make sad dying noises though, so the biggest challenge is trying not to feel bad for snuffing them out.
Teamwork is dreamwork. Let's leave your toast.
The next half starts with a Mirror Maiden. I attack her from behind and push towards the center so I can position myself closer to the opposite end where the Consecrated Beast will later spawn. Then the Consecrated Beast is a straightforward fight. Just try to dodge its attacks or have a strong shield so you're not staggered too much.
Exterminate! Lightning Terrified! I'll protect us.
No rest for the wicked.
Propagate! By royal decree! Our bond is strong!
For Chamber 3, we start with a wave of Natlan warriors. You can approach them from the center and they will crowd around you anyway, so just use your AoE attacks to take them down together.
Absorption test! Teamwork is strength!
Then there are two lava avatars. I go to one side and start attacking, while the other one will teleport to our position, grouping them up for easier AoE damage. They can teleport away, but generally they'll just keep heading towards you anyway, so it's effortless to be near them. They do have a really high pyro resistance, so pyro attacks are less effective. They also have a permanent pyro aura, so you can use that to your advantage, like triggering vaporizes with a hydro unit or overload with an electro unit. Last is the local legend variant of the Wave Shuttler. One of her first attacks is throwing a cryo canister that will apply cryo AoE damage, which can also slow you down or trigger reactions against you. To destroy it, use pyro or electro attacks, and this can make the fight easier. She also has one attack where she surfs around, but you can just dodge and wait until she finishes, so you don't waste stamina running after her. She generally moves around a lot and can stagger you, so dodging or having a shield will help. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward fight.
Germinate! Out of my way!
Moving on to floor 12, for the first half, the notable elements you want to bring are for countering the Fatui Skirmishers' Cryo and Pyro shields. As such, Pyro and Hydro are the most effective at doing so, having a Pyro unit as well as a useful counter against the Yumkasaur boss. The Yumkasaur and Terrorshrooms also have high Dendro resistance, so it's less advised to bring Dendro-heavy teams in this half. Groupers can somewhat help with the first waves of Chambers 1 and 2, but it's unnecessary. The same Vaporized team I used is a good fit to counter the Fatui's shields. For the second half, the most notable enemy is the Hydro Phantasm, which has a permanent Hydro Aura and Hydro damage immunity, so avoid bringing Hydro-centric teams. A Pyro team is generally especially effective against it for constant vaporized damage. Dendro units can also trigger Bloom on it, which you can also trigger Hyperbloom or Burgeon reactions on. The next chambers don't have any strict elemental restrictions, so I also went ahead with the same Quick Bloom team. Going into the first chamber, the first wave has Kairagi and Nobushi. I prefer to bait them to the starting point since that's close to where the next wave will spawn. The Nobushi will head towards you, while the Kairagi sometimes jump away from you, so you can position yourself to try and make him jump towards where the others are or where the next wave spawns. They don't have that much HP anyway. So this second wave has two Fatui Skirmishers, but they're the local legend variants, with a main difference being that they have a lot more HP than the normal Skirmishers. The Pyro Fatui also jumps away from you, so you can bait him to jump towards the Cryo one, which makes them easily grouped up. They have their Pyro and Cryo armor, so having the right counter elements, like my Hydro and Pyro respectively, will remove the armor and stun them for more damage. If you have an Anemo unit, you can also swirl their elemental auras onto each other to help break their armors. If they still manage to get up, the Pyro one will try to jump away again, so position yourself to group them effectively.
Let's light it up!
Our cause is as unyielding as ice.
The second half starts with a Ruin Drake. You can hit its exposed cores to stun it, but it's easy to kill before it gets to that point anyway.
Out of my way! Propagate! Wings of darkness!
Then there's a Fire Eremite lady with her pet. Once she summons her pet, you can just kill it to stun the Eremite master and make her more vulnerable to damage.
I'll settle this.
Bloom as the flowers in Guravan!
Shadow Raven!
Round as one!
The third wave is the Hydro Phantasm, which is the hardest of the three. It telegraphs its attacks with its animations, and you do want to dodge them or have strong shielding since they can hit hard and stagger you a lot otherwise. It has a permanent Hydro Aura, which limits certain reactions, but you can exploit that in other ways, like using a Pyro DPS to consistently trigger Vaporize, or a Dendro unit to trigger Bloom for Dendro cores, like I'm doing with Traveler.
Germinate! Midnight Fantastic!
Next up, in this first wave, it's just 3 shroom monsters. You can position yourself to one side so you can push them towards one another in a line. This is just a warm-up to the actual boss though, the Jadeplume Terrorshroom.
Everybody stand back! Off we go!
It's a familiar fight for a lot of you, but those who aren't as familiar yet, an effective strategy against the chicken is using the quicken reaction to force it into its enraged state and then stun it afterwards, giving you a nice window to deal a lot of damage uninterrupted. However, I'm not using a quicken team, and having a pyro unit can trigger burning, which will make it enter the scorched state, during which it'll summon shrooms that can aid it in battle. It can be annoying, but it's not a big deal, and they'll be easy to get rid of, especially with AoE damage. Either way, just keep repeating the cycle until it's dead.
Teamwork is dreamwork! Let's light it up!
Then the second half starts with an Animo Serpent Knight. It's a mostly straightforward single target fight. If you have a shielder though and it attacks you, it can buff and blink itself. But even if that happens, it's fine and just generally leads to a very minor delay.
Wings of darkness!
And for the actual boss, it's Maguu Kenki. As always, it takes a while to get up, so you generally want to start your rotation once it's actually about to stand up.
Germinate! Oz, reveal thy... Help protect us! Out of my way! Propagate! Dissipate!
Upon reaching 70% HP, it'll turn invulnerable to do an AoE charged attack, so just dodge or shield against it. From there it can be random if it'll stay in place a bit or teleport right after, so if you're using units that place down field abilities, be mindful of timing it, since it tends to zip around. Putting such abilities down after it teleports and you chase it is generally a good time to do so. Dodge its ranged attacks as well, as those can stagger you a lot if they hit you consecutively. Finally, on to the last chamber. This is the debut of the Yumkasaur boss, and it mainly becomes a punching bag for us. It can slam you down and deal pyro damage, but as long as you can iframe or shield against its attacks, you'll survive with no problem. At a certain point, it summons its flame granites, which you can destroy with pyro. In my case, Xiangling's Pyronado effortlessly destroyed the flame granites. Doing so makes them explode and deal damage back to the boss, and if all 3 are destroyed, it gets stunned, which is a good window to deal a lot of damage or restart your rotation uninterrupted.
Animal test 6308.
Then we have the PMA boss for our last fight, which was also in the last cycle, so hopefully it's a familiar fight already. It telegraphs its attacks pretty obviously, so just keep on dodging them if you don't have a shielder. If it flies into the air, you can still continue attacking it if you have a ranged unit.
Shadow Raven! Germinate! I'll settle this! Come on! We can do it! Stand with me! Let's dance!
After around 40 seconds, or at 30% HP, it enters its defensive mode and creates 4 Ruined Sentinels which have their own attack and movement patterns. Look for the one with the ring aura, and that's who you need to kill to make the PMA vulnerable again. If it's the Dorito, it dashes away from you, so as a trick, keep it between you and the PMA so it'll dash towards the PMA. That way it's easier to start hitting the PMA as soon as the Dorito is dead. If it's the crab, then it'll be very annoying to kill if it puts up its shields, so you can try stunning it by poking its eye or baiting it to the PMA so it'll jump on you. If it's the snake-like one, you can actually bait it beside the PMA since it will try to teleport towards you, which can also make it more convenient to kill the PMA. Once the PMA is vulnerable, just kill it ASAP.
Shadow Raven! This way!
And that's it for this cycle's Abyss Guide. Comment down below what you think of the enemies in this Abyss cycle and what teams you use to take them down. And as usual, if you're having a difficult time clearing it right now, don't fret. Abyss only resets once a month, so you have lots of time to attempt it and continue to improve your teams if needed. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!
I wonder when I'll be as tall as my big...